And I can see already Salim Ali Saab raising his hands. Please, Salim Ali Saab is the former joint, special director of CBI. So I think I'm sure he has some pertinent question. Please
Sorry,
go
I
ahead,
can't
Salim.
see you. Who is it?
Dr. Salim Ali.
Okay, Dr. Salim Ali.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sumaiya, Shaikh. Wonderful presentation. I would like to share some of my experience with you as far as the terrorism is concerned.
Sure.
I'm a police officer who has dealt with LTT, dealt with normal criminals who have killed more than 20 people, and then another terrorist group in Northeast known as NLFT.
Right.
I saw in your slide number 2 that all terrorism is due to pre-existing psychopathy. You have mentioned in one of your, it's mentioned there in your PPT.
Okay.
That perhaps is not correct. That's what I want to.
No,
as far
it's
as your
not
research
correct.
is concerned, is wonderful. It really fits in with all the normal criminals I've seen across in my career, including the psychopathic killers who have killed the serial killers.
Yeah.
And your entire research exactly falls in place. But when it comes to terrorists, perhaps there is a kind of I would like to disagree with you, basically because I have interacted with both LTT, NLFT, and Jammu Kashmir terrorists. Now, in all terrorists, if you see the background, either there is a trauma or a perceived denial. These two put together goes for self-indoctrination. And when there is a self-indoctrination, then the doctrination comes from the state or religion together. When two together get into it, then that culminates into terrorism.
Right.
Here,
I think
if you are
misunderstood me. I think you misunderstood me. I actually didn't mean that I am saying this. This is not my view. It was what was believed before. So that's what I wanted to shatter the myth. So I agree with you. It's not because of psychopathy.
When there is a trauma and there is an indoctrination, they are picked up, either they are picked up by the state or by the religion or by whichever group they want, and accordingly they further indoctrinate them and give them a traumatic training. They incidentally, the PST and PTSD you are talking about, they are inducted into a traumatic training.
Absolutely.
Once they are inducted into that traumatic training, doing anything is no issue at all. That's how they are doing it. Now, since you are in a very sensitive area and since you are dealing with the rehabilitation of terrorism, you need to have all these aspects in mind. And basically, what led the person to terrorism is an important thing which you need to do a proper research. That will help a lot for the humanity. You have done a wonderful job. Amazing to see, and it falls into whatever I have seen in my 35 years of career. Whatever you are telling is, I'm grateful to you for giving this lovely presentation. But at the same time, as far as terrorism is concerned, I just want to give my single piece of advice. That
Thank you so much. That is very enlightening to know that it kind of falls perfectly in line with the research that I'm doing. But I think you misunderstood me when you said that all terrorism is because of psychology. I didn't, because of psychopathology. I didn't mean to say that as my research. This is what previously people believed. I wanted to counteract that and say that's not the case. So I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. It's not the case. And I totally agree about the traumatization of people. They see videos, they see that other people are going through a lot of, the people across the world, Muslims across the world are suffering, and then they become terrorists. So they go through a trauma training and they go through combat training at the same time. So I totally agree this is real.
That's the thing. Another thing I would like to point out here is as far as the traumatic experience is concerned. If you compare the army training vis-a-vis the terrorist training, more or less both are same.
Absolutely. I was going to ask the same question.
How to kill people. So that's how the terrorism comes in. So my request to you, Sumaiya, is that to look into what are the main precursors of terrorism. That is, you will do a big service to the humanity if you do this and try to work on it.
Yeah, so you know that Nazis I was talking about who organized the Charlottesville riots? I was saying the NT guy, and I was comparing him to Abu Huzaifa, who was the Canadian ISIS fighter. So that Nazi guy, he was actually in Iraq. He served in the army for 4 years. and then he came back from Iraq, and then he tried to kill a guy, actually several, one of them. And because he was stabbing these people on the streets, he was stabbing regular Iraqis. And at one point in time, he tried to kill a taxi driver. And because of that, he went to prison in New York State for 4 years. And after he got released from the prison, he got his understanding of neo-Nazi ideology in the prison. When he released, he found this organization and started these Charlottesville riots as a neo-Nazi organization, political organization. So he was a war veteran. He's an Iraqi war veteran. So I totally understand the military has a huge role in I wouldn't say radicalization, but in giving this training of killing other people. And when they come out of the military and when they have these grievances, they end up becoming going on the extreme end of it. So this is very true. I've seen a lot of this.
Yeah. Another thing I've noticed is, and since I have dealt with them, another thing I've noticed is that when religion and state combine together in indoctrination, that group becomes very deadly.
Right.
That group becomes really deadly. If only religion is there, it can be easily tackled. If state is there, it's again difficult to tackle. But if these two are combined together, it is going to be very, very difficult to tackle.
Absolutely.
So these are the areas where you need to have a look at it. Just suggestion, nothing else. You're a young one, have a bright future. Please do look into all these aspects. Thank you so much for your presentation, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Salim Bhai, for those wonderful, very informative inputs and very important inputs. I think we all agree with you on that, certainly. Perhaps if others have any questions, they can go ahead and ask. I can see some doctors here. I'm sure they may have something to say. Medical doctors, my friend Dr. Kamran Khan from...
I'm Dr. Kamran Khan.
Yeah, Dr. Kamran, go ahead, please.
Talk, very inspiring. I'm an oncologist from Mumbai, and so I believe that a lot of mental disorders are now because of neurobiological changes. Like we know that drug addiction and even alcoholism is it's got a neurobiological basis. Is it likely that the people who have these neurobiological changes to start with are more susceptible to the narrative which is developed by a radical religion or by the state? And is it possible to identify these people from their behavior beforehand?
Beforehand, again, this would end up in a lot of false positive, and that's something that it can go into almost in the direction that most people would be opposed to. It will. And people have done that in a lot of countries. They've been using artificial intelligence and a lot of these things to predict this kind of stuff. I am very, very wary of this, because if you look at profiling, it ends up making those profiles of people that may not be violent just because of the way they look and a lot of these things. Maybe biological profiles is the way to go. We're still working on what is it. I'm actually using machine learning to add to the data sets and see if we can find any hypotheses in them. So at the moment, this is very preliminary type of research. But the social research that the other guys are using, the police in particular in Europe, they have been getting a lot of false positives, which is a really bad, it looks really bad on them, because they're basically picking up a lot of the migrants and Muslims around here. And that's not where we want to go in. Maybe with biology we might be able to, but the one thing is common is that a lot of these guys who engage in violent offshoots of terrorism and engage in terrorism later on have been engaging in addiction at the same time. I have spoken with one of the most affluent recruiter of Al Qaeda back then. It was a long time ago. He's actually a white guy. He's a white American who became a naturalized Muslim. Eventually, he's still a Muslim. But he was a recruiter on the internet for Al Qaeda. He was very successful, very popular, and he used a lot of drugs. Alcohol is like one of the basic things that they started off with. But then many Muslims don't engage in alcohol because of the religion, but not everyone's conservative to start with. So they also use a lot of other drugs, and cocaine, for example, is very popular. Methamphetamine is very popular amongst jihadis. They are all addiction is transferable.
It's rampant.
So it's also, yeah, it's very rampant. So that is that. And in the neo-Nazis, I have seen every time they would go out and raid a synagogue and try to hurt people after the prayers, the Jewish prayers, they would celebrate it with alcohol, and they would just drink. So these patterns are very common and very popular. So I wouldn't be surprised that this is the case. Yeah.
That's interesting. And anyone else? Maybe they can straight away start asking the question. I think Majid Saab is speaking. Majid bhai, please go ahead.
I can't see the.
Majid Tariq Saab, I think he was trying to say something. Yes.
Okay.
I think you'll have to unmute yourself, Majid Saab.
I unmuted. I don't want to ask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so you don't have to ask any question. Okay.
I'd like to ask a question, if I may.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay.
Najib, go ahead.
You here.
Oh, Najib,
Yeah.
hello.
Good talk. Now, you said that HAIR 2003 showed 1% tendencies in all human beings exist. Is it instinctive? And what
Sorry,
is
I didn't hear the first part of the question, Najib.
well, the effect of trauma on producing violent behavior is understandable.
Okay.
What is the part of instinctive, what do you call primal instinctive? Primal instinctive. Is it something the part of evolution, which is there in everyone?
Yeah, it's preserved.
A lot of echo that seems there. Eh? I think
Okay.
somebody's mic is on. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's preserved through evolution. It is primal and instinctive, and the reason why I say is that it is so humans as a species, or even like animals, they're not meant to love, or but naturally they're not like good people. And I say this going against a lot of the religious teachings, because we're not good people to start with. We are just made to survive. So because we have these fight and flight responses, we're when we have the adrenaline rush, essentially the front part of the brain, which is the the logical, executive, functional part, doesn't engage with the other parts of the brain instantly, because fight and flight is like so impulsive. It goes like very fast. It takes time to talk to when what we call the second thought process, which comes a lot slower. So because of that reason, we call it this instinctive and primal. But we've been like humans now, because of civilization, of the last, say, 100 years or so, maybe less, we've been conditioned to be more altruistic, be more socially compatible to each other. We have, say, the European Union, the United States. We want to live together and be altruistic, because we think that if we benefit others, we will be benefited. But this is not how we were before, and not always. Or people who live in tribes and societies together, even before civilization, they only had altruism. But if you see like behaviors of lone monkeys and like lone, they're just there to survive, and to do that, they will just do anything, because they're not socially primed to be just and moral people, or moral animals and people as well. So we are actively using our social conditioning, suppressing the urge to be violent in that way, unless we've been put in a bad barrel. And this is, I have using this term all the time, because we studied Abu Ghraib and the atrocities in Abu Ghraib in a very deep manner. And the military guys, and one of the women that I studied very well, they were all like poster boys and poster girls for American nationalism. They were the heroes until they went to Abu Ghraib, and then they were seen posing in front of dead bodies and bodies covered with human feces and really, really disgusting stuff, and enjoying taking photographs. So one as my computer, one woman was she had taken a photo like this, a smile with a smile and a thumbs up next to a dead body in Abu Ghraib, and the dead body was completely decomposed. So those, and they were all poster boys for the American military. Before that, they were like the perfect husbands and daughters and kids. So we're just there to survive, and then if something feels good, it's like an addiction. You know it's bad for you, but it still feels good. When you get addicted into it, you'll just keep on doing something until, you know, I mean, you know something's wrong, but it feels so good. It's like this dopaminergic, rewarding thing that you will just engage in it, even though your common sense will say not to.
Right. So this violent video games those children are playing these days, is it going to have a big impact on increase in terrorism?
I believe that the more realistic the games are, I think I've heard some games. I have two nephews, as you know, my brother's kids, and they're 11 and 10 and 9.5. And we don't get them those realistic looking games, and they ask for it all the time because all their peers play it. And in some of the games, they actually shoot down people who they think are immoral. There's one game that shoots down prostitutes and sex workers only. Like you're a police officer and you just go on a raid with a gun, and it is so realistic. Like you actually see them dying, and you get points in the way that you kill people. So it is all very it is very damaging to the psyche of the kids. That, you know, the violence that they recreate in those games, it is supposed to be given rewarding. And why I'm saying that is that if you look at the video of the Christchurch shooter, he went in and he recorded on his GoPro with the gun right here, and he could see in the visuals that he could see when you can't. I mean, the New Zealand government has banned that video from circulating, but I saw one of the starting videos, and it exactly looked like a game. And for him, that was if you just look at it, you could just simulate that in a game with really good graphics, and you could see something similar. And he behaved in exactly the same way as you would do in one of those really violent video games. So I do feel that it is terrible to give this type of stuff, especially one of those real ones, the augmented reality ones, the ones that feel you're real.
Yeah. Why would, just last question, the certain communities, for example, Parsis in India, there is no 1% terrorism cases up there. So how much the indoctrination has a contribution in producing more and more of the violent behavior people? There are certain communities which have none, really.
Absolutely. I mean, you gotta also have resources to kind of engage in that kind of stuff. There's probably no outfits at all. There's no even enough amount of numbers. I mean, we also know that majority of the Muslims in India don't engage in that kind of behavior. Majority of the Muslims in India, in the rest of the states, like for example Gujarat, like where we're from, there's barely anything. Even the Jamaat-e-Islami, there is like a very dialogue-based outfit, political organization, which like the equivalent of Jamaat-e-Islami in Pakistan is complete opposite. They are the ones promoting these violent killers. But so most of the people, you also have like the means and the resources to engage in that kind of behavior. I suppose Parsis are a small community and generally have very little promotion of violence in their community. They're one of the most peaceful communities that way, and their religion kind of focuses on peace rather than anything else. I mean, most of the religions have some sort of warlike scenario as well. I'm not an expert in religion, so please excuse me if I say something, but Rome wasn't built on peace, and neither was any other country. So we all had wars, but that doesn't mean that we engage in that now. That was back then, and that was history. So I think the importance of violence should reduce in teaching religion to people, to our kids. The need to engage in violence should reduce, and it should not be promoted as something to achieve. I think that's what should be when we talk about different religions, and I think it should be like what Parsis do, try to be altruistic, live in a peaceful way.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure that hasn't answered your question, but yeah, that's kind of what I have to say.
You did. Thank you very much.
No worries.
That was good, interesting. Yes. So I think somebody else can go ahead now, maybe. I see a lot of interesting people here. I can even see Pratik Sinha of Alt News.
Probably just join in to see what I'm saying.
So,
May I ask something?
yes, go ahead. Please go ahead. Thanks for joining.
Sumaiya, I had traveled to Sri Lanka.
Can you turn the, if you want to ask me a question, can you turn the camera on? Because then
Oh, yeah.
I know saying something. Otherwise, it's like I'm talking to anybody.
Can you see me?
She doesn't want to be in Parada.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I had been to Sri Lanka sometime in December. It was exactly 1 year after the church bombings which took place, and I spoke to a lot of Muslims, and the community was in a state of shock because they said these boys were from such well-to-do families. They were such well-behaved religious boys, and we could never imagine like something like this happening. So there was absolutely no prenomination that people had that these boys could behave like that. Some of the most prosperous and religious families of Sri Lanka. So what do you think? It is the religious narrative which gives them a sense of persecution. What could you think is or is just a biochemical disorder which makes them do that? And they would be violent for some other reason, if not for the religion.
I think what they would try, majority of these people wanted something big in their life. They were not happy with this their usual, ABCs as, going from one thing to another, getting an education, getting a job, being married, having kids. So a lot of these people wanted bigger stuff out of their lives, I'm not going to compare them with the Baghdadis or the Amalekis because they're not like that. They were just everyday ordinary individuals. But at the same time, these guys wanted something big. They were privileged. I mean, you see most of the recruitment for ISIS and Al-Qaeda went from the Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia had some of the most privileged Arabs, very wealthy Arabs going into Al-Qaeda, and those were the very people who the Saudi government took out from Guantanamo Bay and go back to Saudi Arabia, and they had their own de-radicalization centers. And what they did was to de-radicalize them, instead of using just religion, they also used more dopamine, more like pleasure. So they rewarded them with even more stuff to rehabilitate them. I mean, I'm sure there are also these programs elsewhere. I think there's one in Turkey to kind of reward them with other pleasures. So the other reward kind of dies down. But you would see the reward of violence is so high, you can almost never topple it. One of the things that I use in my lab to kind of to abate, I would say, ameliorate some of the aggression that we do is pleasurable social interaction, pleasurable social touch. And if you have meaningful social relationships in your life that are pleasurable and that are rewarding for you, you tend to be less aggressive. This is the hypothesis that I'm running on. It is possible that it's not just the power, or it's not just the money. Obviously didn't do much. It didn't do anything for the Saudi kids. It didn't do much for the Sri Lankans. But it could be this being high on power, being able to do something so big and being talked about everywhere after. Becoming in a way immortal, at least in the media, and everyone will talk about them. I think those were the drives. And then because they were born in a Muslim family, they could see the persecution of Muslims everywhere and else in the world. I mean, they don't even need so much of the internet to become radicalized in this way. I mean, back then when 9/11 happened, there wasn't so much of internet to get radicalized. This was very much a propaganda. When the Nazis were radicalized as a state, they did not have internet, but they did have like media and regular newspapers to do the propaganda. So I think it's not one or the other. It's just a situation that we're in. These guys were just born Muslim and they could just use this ideology. But there are so many people who don't. I mean, right now, a lot of the German Nazis are going to Russia to get military training and to come back and do attacks in the European Union. So that's a big threat right now. So, how much this is religion, So a lot of the Christian Nazis I've spoken with actually are atheists. So this is the other thing. The NT guy that I talk about, the Iraqi war veteran, he's also an atheist. But it's about
Naji don't like that.
Sorry?
Naji don't like Naji don't like that.
Naji won't like it. Yeah, we can discuss it when I go to Naji's house.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sumaiya. I think that's quite interesting. I mean, I didn't know about this atheistic link to this whole concept. I think that's worth exploring.
I mean, they're not everybody is, but a lot of them are. They're conservative socially, but they're religiously. One of them actually went to a very strict Catholic school and then ended up hating religion, but wanted some sort of a brotherhood. So the religious identity of Christianity and of Nazism gave him a brotherhood. So it's identity, purpose of life. So that kind of gave him the purpose, that gave him the identity, community sense, and that brotherhood and the Nazism that he found was more important to him than the religion itself. So that's something that they were looking at.
That's very, very interesting, in fact. I think Pratik was trying to say something.
Were you?
No, I was not. I was just listening. I'm just here to listen.
Okay.
May I?
Yeah, please. Somebody else wanted to ask.
Hi,
Yes.
me. Hi, Sumaiya.
Yes,
So I know I might be overreaching here a little bit, but
okay.
this is coming from the video games part about how video games do have a tendency to make people violent. But would that also apply to films and to books? And also, as people, are we conditioned to find violence rewarding to the point of it even being rewarding in simpler contests, something like sports? Would it be the same to win over another?
Slightly different. In video games, you're actually the one enacting the behavior. Versus in films, you're just watching it. It can make you see violence as rewarding and pleasurable, but are you going to act on it just by looking at it? Probably not, unless you're actually conditioned to behave that way. Football is a very interesting thing. I was actually in Paris when the World Cup semifinals were happening, where France was also the player, and I had seen some of the worst, like on street mob behavior. Just to feel good. I mean, there was no reason to do what they were doing. I stopped. I mean, I was only there for a week, and I stopped going. I did not go out on that day. I came back to my hotel 9:30 in the night and shut myself up because of everything was closed, and these guys were going crazy. There were fire, on the main road, next to the river. It was just absolutely deplorable. I could not understand why the guys were high on football and behaving violently at the same time. But football is a way to release aggression, and even if you're not playing, you want to, you feel like you're in a community. You feel like you have something common to bind yourself to. And then there's a lot of testosterone. I mean, I cannot say that testosterone is also one of the hugely responsible hormones in it, but by that definition, I wouldn't say that women are not extremists or violent. They are also, but women also have testosterone. So not everybody who will have testosterone will be violent, but testosterone is used in one of the pathways to come to that hypothalamic circuit that I talked about earlier. It is used in that circuitry to become violent. So being high on testosterone definitely makes you behave that way. Yeah. But yeah, the films, I guess, it is not great because it still represents this, violence in a larger than life way. But I wouldn't say it's the only thing.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to? Is there something that you didn't understand, or maybe I went really fast because. But if something that you don't understand, please ask me. Okay, I guess. Guys, do you have a question? Okay, I think he's left. I don't know.
He'll be back.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Please turn your video on, because then I don't know who's speaking.
Okay.
Khalid, right?
Since you have dealt with the Muslim tour, they were part of your probably study. I wanted to ask whether what is your theory and what does Quran says about it? I mean, is there a reconciliation or there is a conflict between what results you have so far achieved in dealing with behavior?
Sorry, I didn't hear the whole thing. Your voice is breaking up.
My question is, since you have dealt with, am I clear now?
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah, my question is, since you have dealt with Muslim terrorists also, so you must have come across probably the justifications they advance based on religion. So now, based on your study and whatever results you have so far achieved, do you find a reconciliation between that and Quran, or there is a conflict?
I think it's a very broad question. So I spoke to the white guy I was speaking about earlier. He was the main recruiter of Al Qaeda at one point in time. His actual name is Jesse Morton. And then he became something else. So he used Quran and the Hadith to recruit people. And there were several stages of recruitment, but he kind of made 3 stages out of the recruitment process. And his idea was that once the person passes the 3rd stage, and it was given in bit by bit, so it wasn't like a bolus, but it was given in 3 separate bits, and every time you would give the next step, some of them would be lost, and then there will be a certain number of people who will kind of accept or agree to the ideology, and then it would be the next part. And so, for example, one of the first things that they would get taught is Tawheed. So Tawheed al-Hakimiyya is, there's only one God, and, there's no other God, and Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of the God. Every religion, every Muslim can say that, yes, we all agree to it. But these guys would like twist the ideas of the Quran and Hadith, things like Tawheed, to their purpose, and justify it to include other things that are not labeled in Islam in the same way. What they would do is for this first teaching, for Tawheed al-Hakimiyya, they would say that yes, we agree to this, that there is no other God, which most Muslims believe in, but Allah is the only legislator, of Muslims. And by that definition, if somebody else is trying, or the lawgiver, a legislator or the lawgiver, and by definition, if somebody else is giving you a certain set of laws, that is against the religion. So by that notion, any other law-giving organization, the country, the government, or even your work office, your institute, your school, university, is we should not accept those laws. And by definition, if we're accepting those laws, then we're not the right kind of Muslims. And in the second phase, they would say that all idol worship, and they would use the incident when the Prophet Muhammad went into Makkah and destroyed all these idols there, say that basically we should not be doing idol worship. And by definition, for ISIS, even everything that represents the other, like something that is not within the caliphate, is an idol. So the ballot box is an idol. The voting card is an idol. The passport is an idol. You destroy all of these things. The president, the prime minister, is an idol. You destroy all of these notions that is symbolism of something that is not within the framework of Islam, or what is in the Quran and the Hadith. You have to destroy that, and whether it's a real idol or a symbol of the idol. And by going through these twisted versions of what the Quran and the Hadith said, they would kind of agree them into doing a certain number of things. And when the final stage comes, it is the final stage basically means that your affiliation should only be with Muslims and with nobody else. And that would include not just the non-believers, but also the people who are not the right kind of Muslims. And it's often those people. And specifically, it starts with the family. Most of these guys turn down their own families before going out and doing other people, inflicting violence on other people, because their family is not the right kind of Muslim, because they're not like them. And it's often the families who don't agree with their behaviors especially in the West, you would see so many mothers and sisters and fathers have come out of the terrorists who've gone to ISIS and said that this is not what we taught, simply because they did not grow up in a conservative environment. They just got these teachings through internet. People like Jesse Morton would recruit them. So I don't see it as a conflict. I just see this twisted version of it being used in a different. And I know how Jesse Morton is because I've spoken with him so many times. He is such a smart guy. Even now, like, you know, you cannot change a person so much, right? He can convince you into anything pretty much. You know, so he's an incredibly smart guy. He can talk his way out of stuff, and that's what he used to recruit those people. And with the framework of an ideology or of a violent ideology, you could practically do anything. These are just conversations that we would have with people on the internet, in chat forums and stuff.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I'm not an expert in religion, but I do understand the basis of it, and I do understand the recruitment strategies. So forgive me if I say something that is not agreeable to you guys.
Yeah, but another question that arises is, does your theory of why somebody could be violent, because you're a Muslim, that's why the question comes to you, your theory that why somebody could be violent, does it reconcile with what Quran says about a human being? Done kind of study.
Is it a personal question?
Is to convince at least Muslims.
Is this a personal question, or is it of the terrorists that I've spoken with?
No, it is based on the talk. No, it's not a personal question.
Okay, I just don't understand what. So most of the Muslims who get recruited actually go there. So there was a girl that I spoke with earlier. She was a Muslim British who was from Scotland. Not British, from Scotland. Got recruited into ISIS, and she became one of the ISIS brides. Actually started to look and follow these things online because she was just curious. Her idea was that how can these people be Muslims if they are so cruel and so violent? So most people who go into this looking for questions are actually believing that they could not be Muslims because of the specific things that they're doing, and Muslims are not like this. At least the people that she knew were not like this. So majority of the people actually think that these are not the right kind of Muslims. But when you look at it from their framework, they feel that, well, these are the right kind of Muslims, and our parents and whoever's talking us out of the ideology are not the right kind of Muslims. So it really depends on where you are. But I don't think it's got Quran's teachings has got anything to do with the biology. As I said earlier, we don't even need the biology. We don't even need the ideology or the Quran to justify some of these behaviors. You know, we're humans, and these behaviors are inherent to us. If that would be the case, we would only have Muslim terrorists and not anybody else. So it's not. I don't think it's compatible to that.
On the contrary, the Quran tries to suppress these behaviors in humans, right? You know, try to make them more peaceful. That's what it does. But actually, they misinterpret it to radicalize them. So that's the whole problem.
Yeah, as I said,
everything boils down to interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah, the Tawheed, and you know, so all these.
Actually, the idea of Tawheed itself gives the impression that Islam is only about Allah, but actually, Islam is more about humans than God. God comes second because God doesn't need humans, whereas humans need God. So therefore, the focus is on Huquq al-Ibad, as I say, not Huquq Allah. So they try to shift the focus to Allah, and then after that to the Prophet, of course, and then that's how they misinterpret Islam and radicalize people for their own narrow ends. It happens all the time.
Yeah, I mean, the final principle of radicalization, al-wala wal-bara, which is one of the last coffins, last nail in the coffin, that's considered as one of the most important ones. But I mean, you know, you can interpret a lot of these things in a lot of ways, taking things out of context, I suppose. So. Yeah.
That's how it is. Right. Any other question?
If I may.
Yes, Najid.
All right.
Yeah, Najid, please.
Thank you. Sumaiya, it's a little bit
Can
more.
I see you guys? I can't see you at
No,
all.
you may not, because I just woke up this early morning.
It's okay.
So what? Yeah. I mean, if you haven't brushed your teeth, Najid, that won't show. Don't worry.
I know. No, I want to just keep myself.
No, I insist. I want to answer the question,
Come
but I
on.
want to see you guys.
Come on, Najid.
Come on. Okay. All right. Let me see if I can. No, it does not allow me.
Oh, I'm
no.
sure you can.
We don't believe that.
Is
No,
Nishri
it's
with you?
not. Well, all right. More important is the question. Let's go ahead with the question. I know. Next time.
Okay.
I'll call you. I'll give you a video call, and then we will talk. But here, if violence is a part of evolution, because it seems like it is, what was the purpose of nature in giving violence in the evolution of species? Why?
To basically get what we want. I mean, why do animals, engage in violence? To get money or power, basically to survive. Nature did not give us anything for a reason, not always. I mean, we have the wisdom tooth. We have so many things. We have the sesamoid bone, which is right in the middle of here. It is completely useless. There are so many things that nature has not given us for a reason. So evolution is very complicated. It doesn't always. I mean, things like immune cells were susceptible to infections. I mean, why would immune cells be susceptible? And then we have HIV infections. So nature has a way of we think that nature is perfect and evolution is perfect. It's not actually. Evolution is just a process to become perfect, but it will always be less than perfect. I don't think that nature thought about something and we said, okay, let's make these perfect species. I don't think that's actually going to be a thing ever. We just have to do with whatever the best we have. Yeah. So we're just there to survive. I said, I mean, one of the things that Rob Sapolsky says, one of my favorite scientists who's done this research in primates for a long time. He still is, I think, a Stanford professor of neurobiology. Sapolsky is also Jewish. He's a wonderful guy. He's an absolute favorite of mine. So he said that evolutionary biology or neurobiology as well says that the opposite of love is not hate. You know how we say hate can be fulfilled with love and vice versa. And the opposite of love is indifference, or the opposite of hate is also indifference. So if you want to counter something, we just want to make people indifferent, about these things. So, there you are. Come on, you have your shirt on.
I'm a computer illiterate guy, I tried to do that.
How can scientists be computer illiterate? I don't believe that.
I lost your answer. I could not hear anything because I was trying to get back in the video mode and I had to go to the setting.
Okay, what I said was that nature is not perfect. I mean, we have so many evolutionary useless things like the sesamoid bone, for example, which is like a bone here. We never use it. We don't need it. We have wisdom tooth and things like that. So nature is not meant to make things perfect for us. We used violence for survival back then, and now we use violence to do a certain things. Military uses violence for protection and security, but the bad type of violence is condemned, not the good type of violence. But I don't agree that there should be a distinction. I feel like people say this is the good Taliban and the bad Taliban, and we should talk with the good Taliban and not with the bad Taliban. But their violence is violence at the end of the day. Yeah.
Even you spoke about al-wala and bara, Sumaiya. Actually, a similar concept is al-hubbu fillah wal-bughzu fillah in Islam. I don't know if you've heard of that, which means enmity for the sake of Allah and love for the sake of Allah. So if you hate another guy, you hate him for the sake of Allah. Bughz, al-hub is love. Opposite of love is bughz, the hate. So I mean, this suggests that you can hate somebody in the name of Allah. So this is how these people are being brainwashed, and this guy is the enemy of Islam. You need to hate this guy, and therefore go and kill him or maybe harm him, whatever. So these are the kind of things which find very little support in the Quran. On the contrary, Quran tries to suppress these kind of tendencies in humans. The Quran is all about trying to, the brain. As I said, how the neurobiology is important. The Quran is all about suppressing that and how to kind of domesticate your brain in a sense that it doesn't lead towards violence. But on the contrary, and unfortunately, they have used it for just the opposite. So we are trying to do a lot to try to reverse that, but ours is a very small group. We're trying our best, but I don't know. We hope we succeed in some way, inshallah. But I'm sure the others who would like to join in, chip in with some more. Even if somebody has a comment, they can offer it, not just a question. Please go ahead. I can see a Dr. Hurmatun Nisa, maybe a lady, no lady has asked any questions so far, perhaps. If
I did not know there were women here.
Yeah, they were there. Come on, this is not a male club.
Well, aren't all places male clubs?
Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't have invited you. So
I'm an outlier.
Yeah. I don't know if she's trying to speak, Dr. Hurmatinusa, you need to unmute yourself. Or can you unmute everybody? If anybody wants to come in, let them come in.
Yes, I have unmuted her.
Yeah. Anybody would like to ask a question? Or a comment?
I can see a lot of people who've never actually showed their face.
Yeah.
Just going through the list now and see who else is here.
Yeah. Khalilur Rahman sir, would you like to say anything?
Hello.
Yeah, Khalilur bhai, go ahead if you have anything to say.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Assalamu alaikum to all. Quran is clear in saying that Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha waja'alnakum shu'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum inna allaha alimun qabeer. When it is said that every people are from Adam and Hawa and they are of the same community, Huzur saying is that kullukum ayalullah, all the people are God's community. So why is it some go astray? I'm a Muslim, so I'm talking of Islam. It is a case with every religion. Is there any reason? And another thing I want to know, Madam, your speech was very inspiring. I was listening to it very carefully. How is it possible for rulers of different countries to continue in power after torturing people? Please.
Sorry, how is it possible for countries?
Because they have limitations, they have conscience, but they do a lot of wrong things. They torture people, they kill people. In spite of that, they continue in power. How is it possible?
They continue in power.
Yes, continue in power.
It's talking about rulers continuing in power despite
difference of different countries. Yes, different countries. They continue in power. No conscience. What is it? They keep quiet. How bold is there? Is their heart different from ours? Or people are made of different hearts, conscience, I mean.
That's not true. Actually, a lot of people say, this is a very interesting case, and I'm sure this could come as a surprise. You know how I am from Gujarat, and I've seen some of the stuff myself during 2002, and we kind of escaped after a while in the same year, however. And I went back more than a decade and a half later and spoke to some of the people who got convicted and jailed. A few people, and one of them who led the mob to one of the biggest cases that happened. And Naji and Nishrin, if you're listening, this is the same guy who came to the Goldberg Society. When I went and spoke to him and I interviewed him for a very, very long time, it was more than 6 hours we were talking, he appeared, or what he showed was his best foot forward. He appeared to be the best individual who was just framed for the certain interest. Now, I wasn't a journalist or anything, and I wasn't there to get any facts out of him that nobody had ever. He was already convicted. He had spent some time in jail. He was out on bail, and he was showing himself as a victim of, the general establishment. And these guys didn't show themselves as heartless. He was the biggest animal enthusiast and the most caring person there for animals. Like a lot of the dogs, stray dogs would come and get food from him and stuff like that, and he would pretend that he is some sort of philanthropist as well. There are very stark differences between who does these type of individuals. So people who are violent, they're not necessarily violent everywhere. They would pick and choose people. For example, even the Nazis, like people who've been labeled as the other, or they're from a specific community or race or religion, only towards those they behave in a certain way. At the same time, this guy also told me that when he was in prison, his best friend was one of the Ahmedabad's Muslim, like some sort of local don or whatever, that some petty guy. But that was his best friend. So he was also showing these other sides of me. And of course, he didn't know who I was. He just assumed that I was not a Muslim. My name was Sumaiya, not Sumaiya. And he kept asking my caste, and I said, look, I don't do any of this. And he could never, because his own biases against Muslims and how Gujarati Muslims are played in such a way. I did not correct him, but I did not lie to him either. And he went on to assume that I was probably from Gujarat, but obviously not Indian. And he was like the most polite. And the guy who traveled with me was a journalist from a local newspaper. And he said that he's the nicest that I've ever seen him. And this is the most he's ever spoken to anybody every time he's taken any other person to meet him. And he invited me to his house the next day. He showed me his family photos. He invited me to his son's wedding, etc., etc. So people are complex, but if they have this specific fear, disgust, or hate towards a certain group of people, then they're completely different. I mean, the same thing in Rwanda, with in between those two communities, they were calling them cockroaches and vermins and all sorts of names. But that didn't mean that they were bad people among themselves. They were not violent in general. They were just violent towards the other people, or they were aggressive, or towards the other people. So it's not like black and white for most people. They can be nice to some people and they can be bad to some people. I think this whole idea of good and bad is very bad. It's a very bad idea. It's mostly generated from fairy stories, and American politics also talks about good people, bad people, but it's never true. I really don't believe in this type of a distribution of people. You're everything at the same time, depending on the situation and the context.
Interesting, very interesting. I think.
Thank you for the interesting talk. I request FICE to have such meetings quite often, at least once or twice a month.
Yeah, we'll be having every week, actually.
Oh, very good. Welcome.
We're holding this kind of meetings every Sunday. You can join in. This is the first time you're coming. I'll send you the invite next time. I think.
No. I received the link. I came.
No. I'll send you again. I'll send you regularly now.
Very good.
We hold such meetings every week, in fact.
Thank you.
So, anybody else who's there who would like to say anything or ask anything?
Yeah, good evening.
Yeah, Shavkat, go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am, for the.
Thank you. Are you from Turkey?
Yeah, I am from Turkey.
Whereabouts are you from?
Actually, I was born in Adana, close to Iraq. But recently, my family lives in Istanbul.
Okay.
I have been living in Chennai about 6 years now.
Okay.
He's in my city now. He's in Chennai.
Yeah, together with.
When I went to Australia, I lived in a largely Turkish majority neighborhood in Australia. It was very interesting that I escaped Modi's Gujarat and I lived in this Turkish majority neighborhood in Australia, and that was the time when Erdogan had just come into power. So I saw this very quick change in the local population of the Turkish diaspora there, where you could see the older generation wearing skirts that were a little below the knees, but modest skirts, and going to prayers and stuff. These older people who are not so conservative, but a lot of the younger generations, Turkish people of the younger generations becoming more and more conservative in the way that they wore the abaya. And it was fascinating for me to see the difference in the politics that it was and the way it was affecting the diaspora. And my neighborhood was where the first and the largest Turkish mosque in Australia was built. Like it was literally like the wall of the mosque was like next to my house, and it was like a smallish replica of the Sophia Mosque. So it was interesting, and I grew up on Turkish food there in Auburn, in my suburb.
Yes,
So,
I have friends in Australia, and I have friends in Iraq, northern Iraq also, in Erbil.
Your voice is breaking, Shavkat. We can't hear you properly.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, maybe can you keep your microphone nearer?
Yeah, maybe I will make it closer. Can you hear me now? Well,
yeah.
I can't. Yeah, hear you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shavkat.
My actually question about brain. We have a body. Simply, we have a body, and this body consists of cells, trillions and trillions of cells, right? And then the activity is lost of going. In a second, maybe millions of activities are going on within the body, but we are not controlling it. Brain is controlling it simply, right? But I have been thinking, what controls the brain? I understood from your presentation that brain can be cheated also, simply. So I don't understand that something has the capacity of controlling the entire body. You think about like that. On the earth, you have 100 trillions of companies, and you are the one controlling without any mistake, but you can be cheated. So this brings me a question: what controls the brain?
It's very interesting at the same time, but we don't know everything about the brain, right? And that's why I am still employed. But at the same time, we think of brain as a unique single entity, but it's not. It's a bunch of living cells put together. They talk to each other with hormones. They talk to each other with these electrical signals generated in one area that goes to the other area. And then in our entire body and all the living cells, we have whether it's inherited or it's changing constantly, because it does also change constantly, is something called the genome, which is like basically our DNA. And that is a part of that, a huge part of it that is inherited, and that determines our complex traits and behavior and what we're going to do, how tall we're going to be, and how whether we're going to be black or white, or what color of eyes we're going to get, and to some extent some of the behaviors as well. But this I don't know, is there another name for the DNA? It's like a general document of what we're going to become. But that doesn't determine everything about what we're going to become. That's just a starting point. And then if you put them in a certain environment, certain social conditioning, etc., you become the product of what you are. But the starting point of that is your genes. Now, anything impacting that will change you. So even though the brain is the whole organ, every area is different as well. And within the area, there are subsections of subsections until we come down to this basic genetic material that we call cell. And they all function in a way they're like building blocks. So a cell is its own kind of environment, and then group of cells, and then a sector of an area of the brain, and then the entire brain. You saw one of the first few slides I had. The guy had a sharp injury. So basically, the entire brain wasn't talking. It's not functioning with each other. One brain didn't agree with the other area of the brain, but that doesn't mean it wasn't functional. So everything is subconscious. That's happening. Like our gut is moving, breathing and all of that. We're not actively thinking about breathing or digesting food. So that is subconscious. But then we have our conscious side of the brain where we're actually actively making decisions. But a lot of that get influenced by the environment we get put in. And then there is the genetics that influences all of that. So it has been ruled by our own brain, but it's almost like the brain doesn't have the capacity to make every single decision. The genes also have a capacity to make a small amount of decisions, but not everything. I know that's not like a complete answer, but we don't have a complete answer. We still see just the interactions. And when you talk about complex behavioral traits, aggression is one thing. It's actually a lot less complex than other things. Things like, how we vote and, how we pick presidents or political parties and ideologies. That is so complex. Neuroscience has been talking about it since Trump got elected. But we can't really put our finger on what part of the brain and what process has made these decisions. What we can say is that the brain that makes these decisions are not always going through a complex process. Sometimes it's just how you've been made to feel, how you perceive, like what your emotional thing is. And people don't always vote with a thorough understanding of the political process or this pragmatic approach of who we are and what is best for our country. They often work with just emotions, which is impulse, and that's the worst thing that you could do to your country. But unfortunately, most people just use that for making those big decisions. It's called The Slow Brain and the Fast Brain. It's a really nice book. It's a popular book by this guy called Daniel Kahneman, and he says there's a slow brain and the fast brain, and the slow brain is after a few seconds of your thought process, what you decide, versus the fast one. If you have to say something, make a decision in, say, 2 seconds, you probably make a wrong decision. So if you want to make a decision, sleep over it.
But on the other hand, Sumaiya, this guy, Malcolm Gladwell, wrote a book called Blink. And there he argues that the split-second decision that you normally take, it turns out to be the right one in most cases. How would you answer that?
Well, that's the first thing that we've thought about. We haven't engaged all the processes of the brain. It can turn out to be right in a lot of cases, but doesn't mean that they have been coming from an informed understanding of, it depends. That could be the best decision if I want to jump in a pool or want to have an ice cream, but doesn't mean that's the best decision when I want to vote. So
it talks about intuition, intuitively that what you know. Sometimes the brain gives you a suggestion, and that suggestion turns out to be right in most cases. It's an interesting book which I read.
Yeah, I think it's contextual. It's very contextual. It's very contextual.
Contextual, okay,
yeah. For example, in cases of violence, the impulsive decisions are not the best ones.
True.
If you wait and you let your aggression pass away, it is very likely that you're not going to be violent.
So we have any more questions? Oh, Najid, you want to ask something?
Can I? Yes, I would like to. There are too many questions.
Najid. Yeah, go ahead.
You've had many days of grilling me and asking me many questions. You will have
no, but my question is a little bit more scientific in the sense that if these primal instinctive or the violent tendencies, if these are part of evolution, are they the same in males and females, or there's a big difference between the two? Because we don't see so many female violent tendencies as we see male violent tendencies.
Yeah, so they are similar. Social conditioning has a huge impact on them, and by that, social conditioning a lot less. But we've known a lot of female fighters, not just in ISIS. I had spoken with, I think, 5 men in the neo-Nazi, that particular one group that I was speaking with, 5 men and 2 women. So they said that it wasn't a huge distinction, by social conditioning, there were a lot less women, but that doesn't mean that women are not going to take part in these activities. We know the brides of ISIS, we know the jihadi brides, women, Yazidi women, for example, have been fighting ISIS, and this is just a group of women militia in the north of Iraq. They are in the Kurdish area of north of Iraq. They've been fighting ISIS for many years now, since it started. So these were like people who were captured by ISIS on these villages, and then released. So this is just women militia, and we've had that for other groups as well. So that's not true, but women have a different process to it. They have the same brain areas. As I said, testosterone is used in one of the pathways to aggression, this rewarding type of aggression. And women also have testosterone. It's just that male have it more. It's the same concept with alcohol. So a lot of people say that alcohol makes you aggressive, but that's not true. Not everybody who consumes alcohol will become aggressive, but at the same time, people who are already aggressive will become more aggressive after consumption of alcohol. So, so these are like they are complex. Sorry.
No.
So there are complex mechanisms at play here, and we can't just divide it by men and women. I mean, gender classification on men and women is in biology is also being talked about a lot more. And I'm not talking about behavior or what sexuality, or sorry, what gender or sexuality that they fit themselves into. I'm talking about biological gender, and those are also debated. I had one of my subject participants who was biologically a female with some of the male organs, and I just don't know what gender to put her in. But at the same, so I also said that I used social touch based, like pleasurable social interaction based modulation of aggression, and with this particular person, she was completely non-aggressive, even though she was female with male parts. But a lot of the males were engaged in aggression, but a lot of the females were also engaging in aggression. And when we gave them this pleasurable social interaction with touch and stuff, females could reduce the aggression, but males did not. So there's a very differential modulation here and very complex biological processes. I think it's best not to divide the biology with gender when it comes to this, but at the same time, it is a good idea to study it in terms of male and female. But you can't say that only males are aggressive or only they can. I mean, we see, Kashmir also has a lot of, now we see a lot of girls pelting stones and now becoming slightly radicalized in Kashmir. And that wasn't before, so. I mean, I guess even Northeast had some of these women militia in India, and LTT also had some. So.
Thank you.
Any more questions? I think it's about 9:30 now, India time. I don't know what time it is there.
It's 6 o'clock.
Almost 6 o'clock. Okay. I don't know if Najid had his breakfast yet, so he must also be hungry.
Well, we just had breakfast.
Okay, that's why you should stop the camera. Okay. Anyway, so shall we end it then? I mean, if there are no more questions, because I think we have had.
It went on for a while.
You've done for a while. Yeah, most of our discussions last for more than 2.5 hours usually. I think even this one has. So people, no, thanks a lot. It was a wonderful presentation and great engagement on the subject, and which was made even more interesting with this kind of questions that came in from Najid, and even especially from Shavkat, who wanted to know who controls the brain. And I think he was hinting at God, but Sumaiya took it on a different in a different direction. So I thought.
I want to be as objective as possible.
Yeah, of course.
I don't want to
Yeah, I
give
agree with you there. I agree with you there. But I got the feeling that Shavkat was hinting at God. God controls the brain.
No, not at all.
Not
Because
okay, fine.
this question came, I have a friend, his name is Emre, and he's a doctor in Turkey.
Okay.
He's in control. I am a physicist, but at the same time, I like science and I am searching. When you sit down and you don't have nothing to do, you just read and start thinking, other things. I was just thinking, I am also reading Quran, yes. And before, it is not in the Quran, but we know from different sources that the people, even I think some part of science was saying that people, they used to live longer, much longer. But now we are just living an average of 70 years, 80 years, if you are lucky 100 and plus. Then I ask a question, what is the problem with the body, that we are getting old, while our body is having a tendency of healing, right? And why we are getting old, I asked him. And he told me about an enzyme called telomerase and other things. And he sent me some documents, which I'm also reading through. But the telomerase, that enzyme is also controlled by the brain. Then I told him, tell me why brain is killing itself. Brain knows that at the end of this process, when that enzyme becoming short, he will die, this body will die, So he has to answer me. So these are the questions about brain scientific actually, not
Interesting.
Allah is in control, I know. But it should be answer for
Yeah.
So these are the conflicting each other,
Yeah, good I asked, and thanks for the clarification, Shaukat. Very interesting, and in any case, it's very interesting to contemplate further.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Hello?
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 Yeah, I lost everybody and now I'm online again.
That something went wrong.
Yeah.
Hello. Shall I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
No, who are the most violent people? Is there any research to it?
What do you mean most violent people? As I said earlier, the psychopathic types generally have this capacity to be the most violent. Psychopaths, narcissists, and people with personality B disorders. But anybody can be violent. There's, as I said, there is a subset of normal people who could be violent. But the extreme type of the monstrous profiling is generally with the psychopathics and the narcissists and personality disorders.
Thank you.
Is that anyone else around? Because I can't hear anybody. I don't think I can see Faiz or Naji. I'm not sure if they're there. But yeah, you guys can ask any questions like that.
Hello. Am I audible? Yeah, Faisal will join again. He has some connectivity issue. He got disconnected.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak in the meantime? If someone's here to ask any question, I'm more than happy to.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Is that you guys? Can you turn the? I can hear myself.
Well, bhai, you are not visible, audible.
I can't hear anybody ask any question.
Where are you, Faiz bhai?
He just texted that he got disconnected and he's facing technical issues.
Yeah, Professor.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Audible, fine.
Can you hear me?
We hear you, but you are not visible.
No, there's some technical problem from here. I don't know what's the problem. I'm unable to connect. Hello. So I think if you can hear me, if you can hear me, I think
Yes, we hear you.
yeah.
It's audible.
Okay, I think there's some technical problem. Even Najid got disconnected, Shaikh got disconnected, and I got disconnected. I don't know. So shall we end the meeting, Sumaiya, in that case?
Yeah, I guess that might be the wise thing to do.
Yeah, because a lot of people seem to have been disconnected automatically. Even I'm not able to connect back. Second time I tried and I got back. And anyway, thanks a lot, Sumaiya. I mean, if you can hear me, that was a wonderful presentation. And I'm sure people who participated must be motivated to go and study or at least what do you call read up the material that you have presented. And I'm sure the other books that you mentioned, Daniel Kahneman's and Robert Sapolsky, these are all very interesting books. And of course, your own book, which is coming. So actually, when is it likely to be released, your book?
I'm still writing. I was supposed to go to a lot of places to do more research in Kurdistan, in Iraq, and some of the work in the US. I haven't been able to because of the pandemic.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, but we'll see. At least
I think,
over a year, I think. More than a
okay,
year.
but I think whenever that comes, that's going to be a great read, and I'm looking forward to it, inshallah. And thanks a lot for your time once again, Sumaiya. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
I mean, the interest that was shown by the participants, I'm sure if you go on, there will be some more questions, but we can't hold you back, and you have other things to do.
Yeah, I mean, anyone is welcome to contact me anyhow or via Twitter or through guys and ask me whatever you like.
Sure. So anyway, thank you so much, and inshallah we'll be in touch. And this is going to be this is not the first meeting. I'll arrange something in Chennai after lockdown, and perhaps you will have to come to Chennai, and then we will do another meeting in Kerala, perhaps, inshallah, or maybe in Bangalore, a couple of states. Inshallah, our forum will try to arrange a series of meetings on this subject, inshallah. That's the post-COVID. I'm sure that's going to be soon, inshallah.
Great. Yes, inshallah.
So thank you so much then. And friends, once again, I must thank you for being here till the end. I can see a lot of people still here, about 11 people. This wonderful kind of interest they have shown for this topic, and which to many, I'm sure, must have been a very interesting topic. And I'm sure nobody would have listened to this kind of lecture before. So it was a great lecture. Thanks a lot, Sumaiya, and thanks a lot all the people who came here. So good night and salam alaikum to people.